Well, just a day after Antonio Pierce had a press conference in front of the whole Raider Nation and everybody thinking that he could possibly be back next season, the Raiders make the decision to officially fire Antonio Pierce after just one season. Now, I know a lot of people have been, already waiting for this day to come. It's kind of been out there in the air. Everybody's been talking about it. There's been rumors and reports going around that Antonio Pierce could possibly be fired right after the season was over. And I thought it would have happened after the last game of the season, but the Raiders kind of waited a little bit. They even let Antonio Pierce kind of go out and speak, even though it's kind of surprising. Mark Davis and Tom Brady and the rest of this crew finally dropped the bomb today. And I know a lot of Raider Nation is going crazy. Half of Raider Nation kind of surprised by this, thinking that, he didn't deserve this. And the other half of Raider Nation, like, thank God this finally happened, because this team was really, really bad, and we need to go get a coach that at least has some kind of experience, especially if we want to be competitive in the AFC West. It's really crazy how much can change in just a year. Last year, the last game of the season against the Denver Broncos, Raider Nation was clamoring for AP to be the head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders. Heck, I was down for that movement as well, especially with so many different players on the team currently, and so many Raider fans just hyped up about just the run that we had after firing Josh McDaniels. Everybody and their mamas wanted Antonio Pierce to be the head coach, and that's what Mark Davis did with Antonio Pierce. Now, I know a lot of other Raider fans really wanted to go and get Jim Harbaugh because he was the one name that was out there in the open market, and he's the guy that, has won at every level, at every place that he's coached, and he was one name that a lot of Raider Nation wanted as well. So it was a 50-50 split, but having the support from the team, from the current players, guys like Maxx Crosby, Devontae Adams, the list goes on, I feel like Mark Davis was hesitant to just pull the trigger on Antonio Pierce, but he did. Then you fast forward a whole year later, and the Raiders right now being 4-13, going into the offseason, one of the worst teams in the NFL. It just made it clear that, this was not the guy for the job. Now, a lot of people might say that, Antonio Pierce wasn't given a fair shot. We've heard it a lot before. Richard Sherman came out and talked about this subject. A lot of Raider fans have talked about the subject as well. And yes, say what you will say, there was no quarterback on this roster. We had a horrible offensive coordinator. On top of that, there was so many different injuries on the roster that we really had a depleted team for most of the season. But that did not stop the fact that the Raiders had a horrible season, even worse than we did last year, or even the past couple of years. Like I've said before in a previous video, this is the worst Las Vegas Raiders team since they moved over here to Las Vegas. We hold the number 6 spot in the NFL draft, and I know a lot of people don't feel like we had the right roster to help Antonio Pierce turn things around. But then, to coincide with that, I have been one of those guys that have been critical of Antonio Pierce and all the decisions that he's made. His in-game decision making has been horrible. Also, just making the decision on who the starting quarterback was going to be going into this season, putting Gardner Minshew over AOC was the wrong decision, and a lot of people seen that. I was surprised by that move at the time, but at the end of the day, looking at the press conference yesterday when he was asked about if he should have went with AOC over Minshew, he simply said yes. He understands that he made a lot of mistakes in this first season, and one of the big questions was going to be if the Raiders and Mark Davis was going to give him another shot going into next season and letting him learn from his mistakes and having a full offseason, bringing in the quarterback that he wants and finding the right offensive coordinator. Now, that was another thing that I feel like I was really questioning AP, was the fact that when we did not get Cliff Kingsbury in the offseason last year, the first person that we went and brought in was Luke Getsy, who was not on the top of a lot of people's lists. People may say that Tom Telesco made that hiring. It wasn't Antonio Pierce. That wasn't his first choice. It wasn't his first choice, but there was so many other people out there that we could have brought in to be an offensive coordinator. Heck, Scott Turner was a better offensive coordinator in these last couple of games than Luke Getsy, but that's not saying much. I know I voiced my opinions on bringing AP back for another year, and the reason behind that was I didn't want to go through a whole nother regime. I wanted to see what he can do with going out and possibly getting a quarterback of the future and trying to bring in pieces and finding another offensive coordinator to help this team out. If anything, AP did a great job helping this defense with Patrick Graham turn this defense around and also bringing back some culture to the Raiders locker room. Now, that doesn't really mean much if we're not going to go out and win games, but at the end of the day, I feel like he was a great motivator, and there was a lot of players on the team that would have ran through a wall for Antonio Pierce. Plus, I usually give the benefit of the doubt to whoever we bring in to at least have 2 to 3 seasons to turn this thing around. We can't just expect coaches to come in 1 year and turn things around just like that. Now, I know coaches have done that in the past, but still, Antonio Pierce was a guy that didn't know much. then again, that was his downfall as well. Like I stated before, it is kind of crazy that just a day after the presser, the Raiders want to make this announcement, especially after he said this in his press conference. A lot of people thought he would be staying as the head coach.
It's only coming from the outside. It's not inside the building. So to me, there's nothing clean up until I hear it from inside the building.
The crazy thing about that statement is the fact that a lot of people, a lot of media sites went running out the gate saying that Antonio Pierce is going to stay. He's going to be the head coach because of that statement. But people didn't really listen, that he didn't hear nothing yet. Didn't mean that he wasn't going to get fired. From what I've heard, I'm not going to come out and say I have all these sources, but I do know somebody inside, and they were surprised with the move because they said that yesterday all the vibes were good at the Raiders headquarters, and they felt like, they could probably run it back with AP. But there was a meeting between him and Tom Brady, and they just went back and forth on weighing their options. And I think waking up today, they just felt like, what? If we want to compete in the AFC West, we might as well go and try to bring in the best candidate to lead this team moving forward, especially with Tom Brady as a minority owner. Reports have already came out that he's going to be one guy that's going to have a lot of say in who the next quarterback is going to be, and now who the next head coach is going to be. And we already know that Mark Davis respects Tom Brady, and whatever Tom Brady wants to do, he's going to back that up. Now, one guy that we all know is already saved is general manager Tom Telesco, which I think that was the right decision. And I feel like the writing was already on the wall because Mark Davis has already came out and said that Antonio Pierce is going to be judged differently than Tom Telesco. They're not paired up. So if anything was to happen to one, it won't happen to the other. And that just kind of left the door open for the Raiders to fire Antonio Pierce and keep Tom Telesco. Now, Tom Telesco, I would say, has done a great job so far as the GM, especially in the draft, in the NFL draft. The first 3 picks that we had last year were home run picks. And I feel like if there's anything that Tom Telesco can do right, it's actually drafting in the NFL draft. We've had problems drafting in the first round for many, many years before this, but hopefully sitting at number 6, the Raiders can make a move at getting the best player available, or even moving up and getting a quarterback that they really, really want. But getting back to, the Antonio Pierce firing real quick, the Raiders actually made a statement today, making it all official, posting that the Las Vegas Raiders have relieved Antonio Pierce of his duties as head coach. We appreciate Antonio's leadership, first as an interim head coach and this past season as the head coach. Antonio grew up a Raiders fan and his silver and black roots run deep. We are grateful for his ability to reignite what it means to be a Raider throughout the entire organization. We wish nothing but the best for Antonio and his family in the future. And basically that's just another way of just saying, thank you for your time, Antonio Pierce. I know you were a Raider fan, but it just wasn't enough. And I know a lot of people could talk about his roots, going back to Compton, growing up a Raider fan, but it really doesn't matter if we don't win games. And the Raiders this year not only lost so many games, but they also looked dysfunctional. This was even more dysfunctional than a Josh McDaniels team. I also don't think that Mark Davis really wanted to hire Antonio Pierce when Jim Harbaugh was out in the open market. But I do believe that Mark Davis was trying to, make up for the hiring of Josh McDaniels. That was somebody that nobody really wanted, but Mark Davis trusted in to turn this organization around. We knew that turned into a shit show, and he had to fire him. A lot of fans were getting on his head. So when it came known that Antonio Pierce ended up winning a couple of games and winning over the Raidernation last year, it was going to be a tough decision to move on from Antonio Pierce and go out and get a guy like Jim Harbaugh. Now looking back at it, it kind of bit us in the ass, because you look at the Chargers right now, they're succeeding right now in their first season with Jim Harbaugh. And I know Mark Davis just wants to win. That's all he wants to do, is just win. I think going into this offseason, Mark Davis is going to do everything that he can, especially with Tom Brady in the building, to try to bring a team together that can compete next year. And I don't think that the Raiders are too far off in competing, as long as they make the right moves and hire the right coaches. Now, there has been a lot of head coaching candidates out there that has been linked to the Las Vegas Raiders. One name in particular is Mike Vrabel, and I know that he's possibly the favorite to get the job if he wants to come in over here to Las Vegas. But with the New England Patriots just firing Jerod Mayo after one season and right after the game on Sunday, the Patriots could be a really, really real option for Mike Vrabel. And I know that's a job that he really wants, but with Tom Brady's relationship with Mike Vrabel, and with Mike Vrabel's experience as a head coach and being a winning head coach, especially with the Tennessee Titans, I'm pretty sure that Mark Davis and Tom Brady are going to do everything that they can to bring him in over here. Now, another name, if the Raiders aren't able to get him, is offensive coordinator Liam Cohen. Now, a lot of people might not know who he is. I didn't really know much about him either, but he's a guy that can be a strong candidate to be the Raiders' next head coach. Now, he doesn't really have head coaching experience, but he is the Bucs offensive coordinator. And looking at his resume, He's one guy that made Baker Mayfield look like a top 5 quarterback in the league right now. He also made Will Levis look like a first-round draft pick, and he comes from the Sean McVay tree. Now, he's a guy that has a high ceiling as a head coach. I don't really think that he was a head coach before, but as an offense coordinator, he's really done a great job. Now, I don't know if I want to go out and get a brand new rookie head coach and bring him over here, no matter who it will be. I'd rather have somebody with experience, and there are some guys out there that could possibly come over here and interview for a head coaching position with experience. One name to look out for, according to Vinny B, was former Seahawks head coach Pete Carroll. Now you got other names like Brian Flores. You even got Cliff Kingsbury's name coming up. But two names that I feel like is going to be kind of crazy to hear. One is Coach Prime, Deion Sanders. If he was to leave Colorado and want to go and, coach in the NFL, I feel like the Raiders' job could possibly be on the table for him, especially with the thought of possibly going up and getting his son in the draft this year in the first round, Shedeur Sanders, and coaching him in the NFL here in Las Vegas. I think as far as name value and, like prime time and selling tickets and getting people over here to Las Vegas, that could be a possibility. Now, would it be my number one choice? Nah, I would be opposed to that. I feel like it'd be a distraction for Shedeur Sanders and for the Raiders in general. I'd rather go get somebody that's proven already in the NFL. But another name that keeps coming up constantly is former Raiders head coach Jon Gruden. Now we all know that, Jon Gruden resigned as the Raiders head coach years ago when emails surfaced from his past, and he had to step down. And that was at the point where the Raiders were starting to turn things around, which, looking back at it, was really, really crazy. But just to think about bringing Jon Gruden back as the head coach, no, I'm way past that. Especially thinking of a head coach that can't draft for shit in the first round. Jon Gruden is not that guy. I think our time with Jon Gruden has passed, and who knows? You never know. Jon Gruden might go in free agency and bring back Derek Carr. But you know what? That's another story for another video. But he's another guy that's been brought up as well. There's going to be a lot of coaching candidates. I just want somebody that has been proven and a guy that has experience as a head coach, and somebody that could be a motivator of men and bring in the right coaching staff. And offensive coordinator is going to be a big need for whoever we bring in. Whoever it may be, this will be Mark Davis's 6th full-time head coach that he will have to hire. Now, one person I do want to kind of talk about and highlight is Maxx Crosby. A lot of people are wondering how he feels, and he's been vocal about, the coaching staff, about, the organization, and just going from regime to regime, bringing in new people, moving on from new people. He's been the guy that's been constant on this team. And he was on SiriusXM, and he kind of shared his thoughts on the whole thing.
Last year, I was very vocal about, wanting AP here. That's very well known, you know what I mean? And I don't take that back. There's certain things I've done in my career that, maybe I shouldn't have said this, or maybe I should have said more, you know what I mean, in certain times. But where I'm currently at, that's not my job. I'm gonna be real. That's not my job. I know my influence. I know what winning looks like. But at the end of the day, I strictly am focused on what I do best, and being at my best is going to help my teammates, my coaches, being a leader, taking care of the things I can control. So at the end of the day, I have a great relationship with Mark. Me and Mark have been close for years. I love the guy to death, and we have great conversation all the time. But at the end of the day, he's going to do what he thinks is best, and it's his team.
Now, just listening to that, you could definitely tell that Maxx Crosby, honestly, to me, just feels like he's starting to get tired of everything. I know he loves the Raiders. I know he loves his team, and he wants to continue to be a Raider, but there's got to be a point where you want to go and win. And if the Raiders can't bring in the right coaching staff this offseason, it's going to be a crucial offseason, because I feel like whatever we do this offseason is going to determine whether or not we're going to keep Maxx Crosby moving forward. Not saying that Maxx Crosby wants to leave, not saying that the Raiders are going to want to move on from him and trade him away, but just to say that, if we don't go back to winning, at least here in Las Vegas, who knows if these guys want to leave? Who knows if Maxx Crosby wouldn't want to leave from this team, because we have no type of stability over here in this organization. We are so used to bringing in coaches and expecting them to turn things around and then just moving on from it just like that. I believe if there was a coach that I would want to get, it would definitely be Mike Vrabel. At the end of the day, we got to do something to turn this organization around. And if there is any offseason that is really, really important for this team and for this organization moving forward, with Mark Davis pulling the strings and with Tom Brady now in the office pulling strings as well, it will be this offseason. The Raiders will have a lot of cap going into the offseason for free agency. We have prime draft position in the NFL draft. there should be no reason why the Raiders shouldn't be able to turn things around and at least be a playoff team next season. But with all that being said, though, Raider Nation, I know I've been yapping this whole time, but give me your thoughts on this whole thing. Was it right for the Raiders to move on from Antonio Pierce? And if so, who would be your top choice as the next head coach of the Las Vegas Raiders? Let me know your thoughts down in the comments below.